Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves, slightly depleted pod squad this evening. Just myself, Paul Woodhouse and Chris Borden. But if you ask me, it's probably the three big hitters. We're going to have a look back at the Plymouth game. We're going to look ahead to Preston North End tomorrow at Turf Moor. Let's start with Plymouth. Another 3 points. Not particularly convincing second half, although I thought we were really good first half. Chris, these are the kind of performances that if you want to be in the shake-up at the end of the season, you've got to kind of grind out results sometimes, haven't you?
Well, yeah, it's all about eking out victories, when you're not necessarily at your best, and game management. I mean, it's not a great look, is it? Managing a 1-0 win against Plymouth, holding the ball in the corner at home against a team that were struggling against relegation last season, having been newly promoted, and will probably do similar this time. But it's needs must, isn't it? First half they worked plenty of sort of decent situations, down the flanks. There's some decent interplay with Perez and Anthony down the left, and Koleosho got in a couple of times down the right, and but the final ball was sadly lacking for the most part. And I've seen some people sort of suggest that Lyle Foster, his movement, his work rate was all right, but I think we're severely lacking in that sort of that player who you can bounce passes off, up top. Someone who can get hold of the thing, get it under, and bring others into play. And on this season's showing so far, I don't think he's quite that man. But I mean, the penalty, it looked fairly soft at first sight, and then you see, he's almost kicked his head off, hasn't he? And referee's on the spot, and he gives it, and you're thinking, is Josh Brownhill going to fall for the keeper's mind games? I thought he might sort of psych him out, and he took that as cool as you like, and it proved to be enough, didn't it? I think James Trafford could have had a deck chair, and Steve's got a cigar on again for the seems to be how he's playing at the moment. But it's a different test Saturday, but you've got to be confident of adding another home win.
Yeah, and Woody, Chris picked up there. We are severely lacking up front, aren't we? I think it's clear that we're missing a kind of almost a foil up there, aren't we? I know we're only playing one up front rather than a kind of, Ings and Vokes, or, a kind of big man, little man, and maybe things will change if and when Fleming is fit. But we're another one of those performances where you can see Lyle working hard, but either the system doesn't quite click with him, or we just need somebody with a slightly different set of skills, don't we? Because when Jay came on, there was a lot of kind of harrying and chasing, but I don't think he touched the ball very much. I think the jury's still out on Tonje in terms of what he can bring and whether being a central striker is really his kind of forte. It may be that we need somebody to play with Lyle, because at the minute it's just not clicking for the big man, is it?
No, it's we're playing these balls out wide, getting it out wide fairly quickly, and he's either dropping off at the wrong times, but he's definitely not the guy to get on to the end of anything that's being whipped across or being pulled back. He did play a little bit better on Tuesday night, but there's nobody in that midfield trio or anywhere really who can play that ball that he can run onto, which is obviously his straight line direct strength. And when he's dropping off, I thought he held the ball up a couple of times fairly decently, but it's not his natural game, is it? And there's obviously nobody else to fill that gap currently either in the side or on the bench that we've seen so far. But I think positives, that's 2 clean sheets on the bounce, first 2 of Trafford's reign, as it were. And at the back, we didn't look like we were going to get troubled all night. And that's seeming it's been a makeshift back 4 nearly every week. It's an extremely tight back 4, sometimes back 5. So if you're going to build things off a good, solid defensive foundation, I think we've set ourselves up to do that. And there were fits and starts on Tuesday, and it seems to be every game there are certain things that are improving, but it's still not clicking, is it? But I still think that'll come sooner rather than later. So I'm not overly worried. I mean, what is it in our last 5 championship efforts? This is the most points we've attained at this point in time. So, obviously I'm saying that this will be a record-breaking season.
A record-breaking season, that'd be ideal, wouldn't it? But,
yeah.
I mean, Chris, one of the things that I've said this on social media a couple of times, one of the things that I find really refreshing about Scott Parker is he keeps saying, look, there is loads of areas where we're just not good enough at the minute, where there's none of this kind of, hyperbole around kind of like we're second in the league. We're doing, he's basically saying, look, we're winning games without really being the side that I want us to be. That first half, we saw glimpses. I thought we were dominant like we were at Oxford. I mean, at Oxford, we didn't really kind of turn that into something. We are just a slightly sharper final ball or a slightly sharper bit of decision making in the box from probably turning a team over, aren't we?
Oh yeah, there's just a bit more zip to the passing, not to the levels where we quite want it yet, but you say it's just that little, the amount of situations we had where they were looking for a pull back and they've pulled it back too far, or they've not picked someone out, and or the movement hasn't been there, the run hasn't been there, and that's the the $1 million question in football, isn't it? It's the hardest thing to do, as they say, to put the ball in the net. But it's just, I mean, we all want to be a free flowing, creating loads of chances a game, etc. And it's a grind at the moment. But that's as Woody says. I thought Humphrey was excellent Tuesday night. Very tight, when he had to be, dropped off when he had to. He won, his duels, his use of the ball was, he was okay. You're not having Koleosho coming hunting for the ball. He knew, get it out of my feet and feed it to Luca and let him get on with it and try and work some magic. But even Egan Riley, he's not really had a test as such. Sort of physically, someone right up against him and challenging his attributes in that sense. But the way he spreads the play with these crossfield passing, he's seems quite organised. He's a good footballing centre back, I think. But so you're looking ahead to Saturday, and it probably, to all intents and purposes, it looks like Osmajic won't be available. We expect him to collect a lengthy ban for biting. We're talking to a North End fan today. He's looking at the Costa. I think Costa was sent off for attempting to bite Gareth Barry a few years ago. I think Gareth Barry said, well, he actually didn't bite me. He ended up just getting the 3 in the end. And like everyone looks at Suarez. I mean, Suarez was 2 or 3 incidents, wasn't it, when he got the big 10 game suspension. So that's sort of like a cumulative thing. So you imagine he's going to get at least 4. You can't be getting 3. But I believe he sort of ragdolled Ogbonna last night when North End had the little purple patch in the second half, and Ogbonna's he knows his way around the English football, and he's quite a physical centre half. So to not have Osmajic available is a big plus Saturday for Burnley, especially as Heckingbottom seems to have found a way to get the best out of him at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, Preston Woody are, improved, shall we say, under Heckinbotham, and I think Stuart McCall's there as well. They know this division and things like that. It's, I think I read somewhere that North End were hoping for a 4-game suspension, i.e., no more than 4 games. It's quite nicely poised, isn't it, with their result against Watford earlier in the week. They've obviously got 24 hours less to prep, and it's an early kickoff at the Turf, big sellout. But it could be an interesting game, couldn't it? Because they're just a little bit on their uppers, and it'll be a big test for us. But come I'm trying to work out my maths now. Come 2:15 or whatever it is, we could be sitting pretty on the top of the league, couldn't we? If we get a positive result against them.
Yes, it's a horrible start. I saw that on me Apple TV yesterday. 6:40 a.m. start. And yeah, so that had better be a proper bumming, as they say. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very unpleasant 10 o'clock in the morning by the time it's finished. But you're thinking, like Chris is saying, if they do lose Osmadic, and a couple of others are injured as well, it's one thing just getting on the uppers. It's another thing getting on the uppers and the main guys also dropping out. They've got to adapt to that. And they're still languishing down there. So yes, it's a derby, but I think it might be that game where we turn on the afterburners and give them a bit of a showing. I'd like to think.
Yeah, I mean, we love a Lancashire derby, don't we? I know we lost 1-1 to Rovers in the first Lancashire derby of the season.
They also beat North End 0-0 as well, didn't they?
They also beat North End 0-0. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of almost, from a footballing sense, prefer Burnley versus North End. It's kind of my favourite of the derbies because I don't know, it just. I guess we were always playing North End, weren't we, Chris, in them kind of years when Rovers did have the kind of upper hand and they were a division or 2 above us and things like that. But there is something quite special about Burnley North End, isn't there? I know it's not either side's big derby, but it's a proper Lancashire ding-dong, isn't it, quite often?
Well, yeah, people sort of forget. I mean, we didn't play Blackburn for 17 years, obviously, and... during that time, we had a few battles with North End in the basement and on our way back, and that fabulous rivalry around the turn of the millennium. Both promoted in the same season and both pushing the right end of the championship upon promotion, and looked like the way North End. They spent some the money very astutely. They got a few quid from Trevor Hemmings and finished in the playoffs in that first season back. And, you got your Healeys and your Mackens and Gregans and Appletons and Cresswells and Grezza people. They're a super side if you look back. They're always, good managers, Craig Brown, Billy Davis. And you'd have thought for all the world that they would be the one to break the ceiling and get in the Premier League. And, even the year we got there in 2009, they were beaten by Sheffield United in the playoff semi-final, but since then it's just been it's one-way traffic, isn't it? But that title season in 2015-16, they did win at Turf Moor with Will Keane's goal, and they're one of few sides to have beaten Burnley at this level, over the last 10 years or so. It's anything can happen. It is the old derby cliche, and people like Robbie Brady, who I believe had one of his best games in a North End shirt last night. They've got folk who can hurt you, and it's they're capable. Lindsay's had a decent start to the season. He's got his Scottish call up. They don't have a great deal of pace at the back, which maybe one of them afternoons again where we're going to have to pick our way through a team that's banked up, but. I'm probably quite the opposite to it. I don't see it being as comfortable as the last visit here when Teller got I got all 3 and had a bit of a field day. I think it might be a bit of another nervy afternoon.
Yeah, and I guess we don't mind nervy afternoons. Everyone thinks that we think about the end of the championship season under Vincent Kompany and that kind of, unbeaten run and running away with the league and things. But it were quite sticky in the early part, weren't it? I mean, whilst Vincent was trying to kind of integrate all of those players that he'd brought in that summer, we obviously had that amazing start at Huddersfield, but then it got a bit sticky, didn't it? Watford away, Blackpool at home, and it took a while to click. And, you kind of think if Parker has the same effect and clicks, around about game 10, which is what I think we clicked in company season, we're already 2 or 3 points ahead of where Vincent was. I mean, it could be a really special season, couldn't it, if we can just unlock, and that might be the return of Roberts, it might be Fleming coming back in, it might be, a subtle shift in that midfield. You kind of think Parker at some point is going to happen upon his best side through having players back. And I'm quite excited. I don't know about you.
I'd rather us be sticky as we are currently, 1 point off top. This is a good way to be sticky, and I agree with you entirely. We forget that championship season under VK, like you say, there was some very start curious little performances. We're either losing 3-goal leads and horrible little one-pieces, and there were that seemingly endless set of draws where we just didn't see where we were, how we were going to improve necessarily. And then it all suddenly clicked. Blackburn game, Ashley Barnes came too, and that was the key. Like you say, it's either that one player who comes in and adds that missing piece, or something clicks, somebody starts playing. It could very well be Fleming coming back into the side, Roberts coming back into the side, and that little bit of creativity that everybody's talking about, that ability to unlock or allow somebody like Foster to, perform as well as he can do. And as soon as we start doing that, then I think we'll be at the races.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, I'm just interested. I mean, you've seen your fair share of Burnley managers. You've been up close with your fair share of Burnley managers. I know you've not been a press conference with Scott Parker, but I'm just interested in your views on Parker's start. I mean, he didn't have the easiest of starts, did he? I mean, that whole, I'm kind of praying we're still filming Mission to Burnley just to see what that week or two before transfer deadline day must have been like, because he's navigated a real kind of problematic with some grace, hasn't he?
Absolutely, there's been no weeping and wailing. There was no real excuses after Sunderland, and I think a lot of people would have forgiven him if he'd have said, "Well, this ain't what I've signed up for," and walked away. To be honest, but no, I think he's handled himself exceptionally well. You mentioned before, the way he speaks in the in his press conferences. There's no sort of there's no shtick, is there? It seems to be as honest as they come. You ask him a question, you get an honest answer. He's letting you know. There might be a bit of you'd expect to be a bit of games about injury news, etc. But he is open to giving you a bit of a tidbit on that. But yeah, you do find out, Joe Worrell's got a bit of a knock, and then he's out for a period of time. Roberts has been out since the last international break with what looked like an arm injury or whatever, and Fleming's obviously missed a couple. So Benson's posted on his Instagram. He's fighting his way back, but no, I think he just seems to be a thoroughly decent bloke to start with. You see the respect that Wayne Rooney had for him on the touchline on Tuesday night. Obviously, played together in the England squad, albeit briefly. And I think Rooney knows a player, doesn't he? I think we all know Scott Parker was a proper player, and his managerial record is pretty impressive as well so far. But I like how he's going about things. There's no big singing dances. There's no great statements or whatever. He's just quietly going about his business and doing that very well.
Yeah, and Woody, I mean, we were all kind of swept away with the kind of romance of getting a big name in. But it does feel kind of, when you look at everybody else around in the Championship, I mean, West Brom have had a couple of poor results recently, having looked like they were perhaps going to start to canter away. There's only really Sunderland, isn't there? I know, Rovers smashed at Coventry, I think it was midweek. There's only really Sunderland who's kind of, beyond us, kind of kept pace with the early pace setter, if you will, haven't they? They've kind of cantered ahead a little bit. So, there's a lot to be said for not just going for the kind of glamour signing, isn't there? And I know we were all a bit, I think to a man, we were all a bit like, oh God, Scott Parker, Frank Lampard, when they looked like that with the final two. But, I think we were all perhaps caught up in the romanticism of another VK, a Van Nistelrooy or something like that. And I think as we're recording this, last time I looked, United were 3-2 down in a Europa League game. So, perhaps a bullet dodge perhaps there.
It's like Chris was saying, and I think everybody probably agrees, it's quite refreshing after VK's whatever Zen footballing bullshit nonsense to be relatively bullshit free. He understands that the connection has to be made with the fans, and it's not a fake connection either. He's a very authentic fellow. He's telling you as it is, as he sees it. Arguably, maybe a little bit to a fault. Maybe he tells us a little bit too much, and you see a little bit too much on, whereas he's off a little bit on his sleeve at times. But I'd much rather have that than believing in this fake process. We at least know what he's trying to do, and he's honest with us about pretty much everything so far. And everybody, I think, was fairly underwhelmed, and we've said it before. Fulham fans, Bournemouth fans have all said there's a brand of Parker ball, and I think we've seen it to a greater or lesser degree. But I don't think we've been playing as badly as some people make out, all told. And I really do enjoy listening to at least an honest guy who gets football, seems to get the football club, understands what it is to have that relationship with fans and players, to have that relationship with fans. And it just seems it's nice to have an honest broker at the helm. And I think he obviously understands football and how to get out of this division, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I should just update it. He's now United. United have got an equaliser, although Bruno Fernandes has got sent off for the second game in a row by the looks of things. So, wow. Second yellow there against Porto. But yeah, I mean, Chrissy, there was always something about Scott Parker as a player. He was almost a throwback to that kind of Brill Cream era, weren't he? In terms of, shirt always tucked into his shorts. He almost had that kind of cigarette card kind of feel to him, I always thought, when he was a player. Fantastic player, as we've discussed. But that seems to have carried through into almost that old school managerial style. And that's not to say he's a dinosaur of the ilk that we see in terms of not being up with sports science or data or anything like that. But it just feels like really old fashioned values that we were perhaps used to with Sean Dyche and, certainly used to with some of the other managers we've had over the last kind of 20, 30 years. And it feels like he's almost a perfect fit with the wider community of Burnley, doesn't it? That kind of honest, hard-working, no bullshit, as Woody said.
Yeah, there's no sort of cult of personality, is there? Like, say, even when he was a player, there's no sort of great fashion statements, and he looks the absolute business on the touchline. The people have often commented on his Tom Brown cardigans and suits and the Bruno Cucinelli gear, and he in that sense he represents the football club. He looks well turned out every week, but it's no great fashion statement. He's just a classy guy, I think, and like I say, the way he conducts himself, you've seen him out and about at the sort of community events. I think he does understand, what the town means to the club, what the club means to the town and its people, and Yeah, it's just, I've said it a couple of times. Look at who he's played under. You know, you know, played, Mourinho at Chelsea. He's played under Souness. He's played under Harry Redknapp and people like that. And I just think they're, just proper, no bullshit. Just pragmatism. Doing what's necessary to get the job completed. And I say we all want this dream of Brazil '70 football, don't we? But it's ultimately, as we saw last year, play as well as you like if you're getting whooped every week. It's about winning this game, and as long as it's not at all costs, there is no sort of enjoyable football played. It's not just wallop it forward and crack on with it. It's trying to play, it's trying to be pragmatic as well. But it's very promising, and you only have to see the sort of spirit is fostered already. I mean, the celebrations on, celebration police will no doubt be out in force. But Josh Laurent has been a sub last couple of games, and you can tell within the camp he's absolutely buzzing to be here, buzzing that we won the other night. Hannibal, I think it was the Ipswich game. Hannibal had been taken off, and at full time he's like the main cheerleader because they nicked a late winner. There seems a real togetherness, and that will get you so far, allied with the quality that they've got and the organisation that he's building.
Yeah, I was on slightly earlier than I usually am on Tuesday night, and it was really interesting to see him right in the middle of all the warm-ups. Just walking about, but then just grabbing a player, the centre halves, Egan Riley's having a little word. And then even when he was coming onto the pitch, obviously home manager, always the last person out the tunnel, get the applause. But he made a beeline for a couple of players, and you saw him just the odd hand movement, the odd little bit of a chat, and same again in the second half. As he's coming back onto the pitch, the players have done the little, jumping over the corns and all of that bullshit that players do to kind of, warm up having had an orange juice for 15 minutes. But he was kind of on his way back to the bench. He's making a little beeline, and he's just, he's perhaps got Estevans, Egan Riley, and he's just saying, look, we just need to shift it a little bit quicker. And I just thought, what a breath of fresh air for, I know a few managers now kind of, Klopp always famously used to wander around during the warm-ups, and, Pep usually sits on the bench and has a bit of a spy, and I'm not suggesting that, I'm not trying to rewrite history and say, oh, VK was never there watching the bloody warm-ups and things like that. That's what you had Bellamy for and various other people. But it was just that kind of, I don't know, maybe again, that kind of old school mentality of, I want to see what the lads are looking like. And, if there's any nervousness, just pull them to one side and just kind of, give him a little bit of advice. But like Chris said, Woody, I mean, Josh Laurent, I think, was doing like a Klinsmann slide in front of the cricket field stand with Josh Brownhill and things like that. It doesn't matter whether you're in the side. I mean, Hannibal against Portsmouth kind of threw his toys out the pram, shall we say, a little bit. When he was substituted, but he was the first one to be kind of, celebrating, cheerleading. He's up kind of on the edge of the bench, kind of celebrating. It is, when we've watched Mission to Burnley and we've seen, cracks, shall we say, in that side last season, it's amazing that we've been able to kind of, insert a couple of characters and bring the whole squad almost back into being again, haven't we?
Yeah. We're going back to that part in Mission to Burnley where you're saying he needs men. We need men, and that's more a case of we need leaders. We need people to be able to stand up. People who can look to the younger folk, and the younger folk can look to these older established heads. But that thing that you just mentioned there, which I think is vital, it's one thing getting the collective working together, and any side that's doing okay, if you're doing well, the collective feels it, and the team works as a team, and it's relatively easy to let them go out and do the thing. Similarly, if you're having an absolute shocker like we did last year, that also works its way through the side. But it's those little individual bits, it's getting into everybody's head and understanding what it is that they need as individuals, and being able to impart that knowledge that you're seeing as a coach, as a man manager, to be able to help see them through the game. And I think that's the vital piece. And if he's able to do that, and that might be what obviously his management style is, being able to get a group, get them to attach to the fans and the fans back to those players, but also deal with them individually, then I think you're pretty much onto a winner with him with regards to that. And it's about as much, and I think we talk and we laugh about his immaculate dress sense, as it were, but that's about presentation, isn't it? That shows that he's about the details on a personal level for himself, but he's also about those details to individuals within Burnley and within the team in and of itself as well, which again I think is a very good, promising sign.
Yeah, just before we go, I mean, just because I'm really childish and things like that, but Aston Villa won Bayern Munich 0 last night. First group stage defeat in the Champions League for over 5 years. And I think it's actually their first defeat in something like 41 games in the group stage. Now, listen, we know Vincent's had a decent start to life in Germany. I mean, they kind of, smashed the team in the Champions League 9-2, and they've had a couple of, fairly big results. But one of the interesting things was he being interviewed on TNT Sport said that there were a number of Villa players that they were looking at. Obviously, we signed Aaron Ramsey and we're hoping to see him before, but mentioned the fact that, he tried to sign Morgan, I think, and what have you. But it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of, we have a bit of a laugh because he's been beaten. We were all cheering Villa. We were all Villa last night for a small amount of time. But interesting in terms of, we're starting to see some of the kind of patterns of him saying the same stuff, aren't we, Chris? We'll never play worse than that. And, we've got £100 million player for less. It feels a little bit Groundhog Day, doesn't it, with some of the stuff that's coming out of the Bayern camp?
Well, I think, Elise is the latest, isn't it? Yeah, they're sort of suggesting that we've signed a player for 50 million that might be £100 million player, and we're still trying to figure out who the £100 million player might have been at Burnley, to be honest. But it's like Rodgers was an interesting one. He was another kid that came through at City, so they've known all about him. Can you imagine if we'd have landed Rodgers and Cole Palmer last season? My word. But just things like you look at. I think he was keen on a few at Villa. Obviously, say like Ramsey came in. It might have been his brother. Maybe he had a sniff at his brother as well. Philogene that went out to Hull City and ripped it up at times in the Championship. There's some outrageous ability. That young man. But you're looking at the stats and Bayern have dominated, haven't they, in terms of possession and chances, as you'd expect. But goalkeeper in no man's land, as he's basically a third centre half in times now. So it's a fabulous goal to win it. And I don't know. I always look at that last night just more from if ever you go to Villa and people of my sort of generation who watch the European Cup final win. Remember Jimmy Rimmer going off early doors, and you see the banner on the Holt end that's got the commentary, and it's obviously Tony Morley is an ex and future Clarets. Yeah, it was just fabulous to think what he actually went on to achieve. Becoming a European Cup winner and immortalised with the late Gary Shaw. It was just sad to hear of his untimely death last week. Peter Wiv and that team going on and continuing English football's dominance at the time. It's no surprise that Villa sounded absolutely ferocious last night. But there's no jeopardy in this new Champions League, and I dare say they could lose another couple of league games and still go through to the last 16 or whatever. They've got the European Super League in all but name now, and there's no excitement, is there? There's no jeopardy. There's no excitement, and it's going to need a rethink again, I think.
Yeah, it feels like a continually pointless process with some of the teams in there, and I'm a bit of a kind of you know, it's called the Champions League for a reason. You shouldn't be having 4th and 5th place teams playing in it, should you? Let's be honest. But that's probably me being a really, really miserable bastard. But yeah, Villa, you're absolutely right, because I mean, it sounded amazing there, and I've got a couple of friends who are big Villans and go there. And when I lived in Spain, Keith Bradley, who was a star of many a Villa side in the 60s and 70s, owned the bar next to my office called Badger's Bar. And he was always good. I remember kind of doing a bit of an evening there with him and Alex Elder, who also lived out there, and they played at round the same time. But I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Villa. Their kits always looked incredible, and their badge always looked brilliant in the 60s and 70s. And then, you know, the kind of Ron Atkinson era as well with some of their players. So, yes, delighted for more than one reason to see them get that victory after 41-year wait for European football at Villa Park. And, Unai Emery's done a fantastic job there. But let's leave it there, chaps, because we are we've kind of it's getting late in England now, but not so late in Cleveland for Woody. We will be back on Monday with a debrief of Burnley versus Preston North End. Early kickoff tomorrow, don't forget, 12:30 and 6:30, whatever it is over in Woody's land. It's certainly quite an early start, but enjoy the game wherever you're watching it worldwide. Enjoy the rest of today and the weekend, and we will see you on Monday. And until then, up the Clarets.